London streets were buzzing with tourists that sweltering afternoon when something truly shocking happened at Buckingham Palace. A young traveler, hungry for laughs and viral fame, decided to push the limits with a stunt no one expected. Armed with nothing more than a water bottle, he targeted a royal guard, one of the most disciplined soldiers in Britain. What followed wasn't laughter, but a response so intense, so raw, that it left the entire crowd silent and changed the tourist's life forever. Before we dive into this unbelievable story, take a quick second to hit that like button. It really helps share these emotional stories with more people. And if you enjoy tales that reveal the human side behind history and tradition, don't forget to subscribe for more. Share this with a friend who loves royal stories. You never know, it might spark an unforgettable conversation. The summer heat in London felt relentless that afternoon. Tourists swarmed the gates of Buckingham Palace, their phones lifted high, eager to capture the perfect snapshot of the iconic royal guards in their crimson tunics and tall bearskin hats. For most visitors, the guards were a spectacle, silent, stoic, untouchable. But for one traveler, they were an opportunity. His name was Marcus. 28 years old, brimming with restless energy, he had spent weeks roaming through Europe with a single mission: create viral content at every stop. Rome, Paris, Barcelona, every city had given him something. He had danced with strangers, pulled harmless stunts, and watched his online following grow. To Marcus, life was measured in likes, views, and shares. Every outrageous act was another notch in his digital crown. But now, standing before Buckingham Palace, Marcus felt a different kind of temptation. He studied the guards. Not one flinch, not one twitch, even in the blistering heat. The discipline fascinated him, but also challenged him. What if I could break that composure? What if I could be the one who got a reaction? He tightened his grip on his phone. This wasn't just sightseeing anymore. It was a stage. The crowd, the palace, the guards, it was all perfect for performance. Yet behind that excitement pulsed a nagging thought. These weren't street performers. These were soldiers, men with steel in their eyes and years of training in their bones. Still, Marcus pushed the doubt aside. His followers loved boldness, and boldness was exactly what he was about to deliver. He wandered toward a nearby fountain, pretending to be casual. Children splashed gleefully in the water while parents took photos. Marcus filled his bottle, feeling the cool weight of it in his hand. He smirked at his reflection in the rippling surface. "This'll get them talking," he whispered under his breath. As he returned to the palace gates, his heart pounded with adrenaline. He rehearsed his lines in a low voice, imagining the comments that would flood in once he posted the video. The guard closest to him, tall, sharp features, eyes fixed straight ahead, looked carved from stone. Marcus framed him in the shot, making sure the angle was perfect. The sun glared off the soldier's polished buttons, a striking contrast to the sweat dripping down his face. For the briefest moment, Marcus hesitated. Something about a guard's stillness, his sheer composure, made Marcus feel small, as if he was standing before something far bigger than himself. But the urge to perform overpowered the whisper of conscience. He lifted the bottle. "All right, guys," he murmured into the camera, forcing a grin. "Let's help this poor guy cool off." The crowd bustled on, unaware of what was about to happen. A few tourists nearby noticed Marcus edging closer, their expressions a mix of curiosity and disapproval. He ignored them. All that mattered was the shot, the split second that would send ripples through social media. Marcus raised his arm, the water ready to fly. He had no idea that with this one reckless move, his life was about to collide with tradition, discipline, and a soldier's silent burden in a way he would never forget. The sound of boots striking pavement grew louder, and within seconds, 2 Metropolitan Police officers emerged from the edge of the crowd. Their presence was swift but deliberate, as if they had been waiting for this very moment. The crowd parted instinctively, giving them a clear path to Sergeant Wellington and the stunned tourist. Phones rose into the air again, but this time the lenses weren't focused on Buckingham Palace or the guards. They were aimed squarely at Marcus. "Sergeant, what's the situation?" the senior officer asked, his voice clipped, professional. Wellington's face remained unreadable, though his tunic still glistened with water. "This individual threw liquid at me while I was on duty." He recorded the entire incident on his phone. The younger officer, Constable Sarah Mitchell locked eyes with Marcus. "Sir, is that true?" Marcus swallowed hard. His phone trembled slightly in his grip. "Look, it's not what it looks like. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. It was a joke. I just thought he looked hot. His voice trailed off on the officer's steady gaze. "This isn't a joke," Mitchell replied firmly. "What you've done is considered assault on a member of the Guard while performing official duties. That's a criminal offense under British law." The words hung in the air like a heavy verdict. Marcus's stomach dropped. Assault? Criminal offense? Those weren't the phrases he expected when he hit record. He glanced at the crowd, hoping for sympathy, but found only disapproving stares. Parents pulled their children closer, some shaking their heads. Others murmured to each other in hushed tones. Unbelievable! He thought that was funny. For Marcus, the world seemed to tilt. His followers, his audience, his imagined cheers, all of it vanished. In its place was the suffocating reality of handcuffs, legal trouble, and humiliation. "Please," he stammered, "I didn't mean any harm. I'm just a tourist from the States. I didn't know it was illegal." Inspector Hughes, the older officer, stepped closer. His weathered face showed years of dealing with palace disturbances. "Son," he said calmly, "these guards aren't props for your entertainment. They are soldiers. They stand here not for your amusement, but as a living tradition and as protection for this country's monarchy. What you did wasn't harmless. It was disrespectful." Marcus's chest tightened. He looked at Wellington again, but the guard had already returned to his rigid posture, gazed forward, as if the moment had never happened. That almost made it worse, the sheer composure of the man he had humiliated. The younger officer reached for Marcus's phone. "We'll need to review the footage." Panic surged through him. He thought of the video going viral, not as a funny stunt, but as proof of his foolishness, circulating with captions he wouldn't control. The shame felt heavier than the heat pressing down on London streets. In that moment, Marcus finally understood. This wasn't a spectacle anymore. It was a lesson, one that was unfolding in front of hundreds of silent witnesses. To the crowd, he looked like an unshakable statue, a symbol of discipline, unmoved by heat, noise, or endless tourist tricks. But behind that flawless composure, Sergeant James Wellington carried a weight few could see. James wasn't just any soldier. At 33, he had already served more than a decade in the British Army, with tours overseas before being selected for one of the most prestigious and demanding roles, a Queen's Guard. For him, standing at Buckingham Palace wasn't a tourist attraction. It was an honor, a sacred duty rooted in centuries of tradition. Every button polished, every movement measured. It was his way of upholding something larger than himself. But discipline doesn't erase humanity. And that week, James's humanity was bleeding through in ways no one around him could guess. Just days earlier, he'd received a call that shook him to his core. His younger brother, Tom, also a soldier, had been injured during a training exercise abroad. The news left James restless, torn between duty to his post and the urge to be at his brother's side. He hadn't slept properly in days, his mind split between the palace gates and a hospital bed miles away. Still, every morning he dressed with precision, checking his reflection until not a crease or smudge remained. Tourists saw only a ceremonial figure in red and black, but for James, each uniform inspection was a shield, a way to mask the turmoil inside. That afternoon, the sun bore down relentlessly. Sweat trickled beneath his collar, soaking into fabric that he couldn't adjust or wipe away. His jaw tightened, but his gaze never faltered. To move, to flinch, to acknowledge the discomfort that would betray everything he stood for. And so, like every guard before him, he endured. Over the years, James had faced all kinds of antics. People shouting in his ear, tourists dancing wildly in front of him. Some even tried to make him laugh with silly faces or jokes. He had mastered the art of silence, of being a wall between the monarchy and the world's chaos. But the truth was, these encounters chip away at him more than he admitted. He wasn't a machine. He was a man carrying duty like armor, even as strangers treated him like an attraction. And now, on this particular day, the distraction stung more than usual. Every cheer from the crowd, every burst of laughter, it reminded him how far he was from his brother's hospital bed. Yet still, he held the line. because that was what the uniform demanded. When Marcus, the tourist with the restless eyes and a phone clutched like a weapon, drew closer, James saw him in the corner of his vision. He'd seen the type before, hungry for a reaction, blind to the respect this post deserved. Usually, James blocked it out. But today, with grief simmering beneath the surface and sweat pouring down his back, something about this young man's smirk cut deeper than usual. He kept his eyes locked ahead, refusing to break centuries of tradition. But inside, the storm was building. And when the water came, cold and sudden, it wouldn't just touch his skin. It would crack through the armor he had spent years perfecting the moment arrived in a heartbeat. Marcus tilted the bottle, and with a flick of his wrist, a stream of cold water splashed against Sergeant Wellington's face and chest. Droplets clung to the guard's polished buttons before sliding down the crimson fabric, leaving dark stains across the tunic he had so carefully prepared that morning. The crowd's noise died instantly. Conversations, laughter, camera shutters, everything seemed to freeze. What had moments earlier been the cheerful hum of tourists became a vacuum of silence, broken only by the faint patter of water dripping onto stone. Marcus grinned at first, holding his phone steady, waiting for the laugh, the smirk, the reaction that would make his video go viral. But the expression he captured wasn't amusement. For the first time in hours, Sergeant Wellington moved. Slowly, deliberately, his head turned until his piercing blue eyes met Marcus's. No longer a distant stare into nothingness. Now his gaze burned with something raw. Fury, disappointment, and the exhaustion of years of being treated as an object rather than a soldier. The silence thickened. Families in the crowd clutched their children's hands. A woman lowered her phone, whispering to a friend in disbelief. Even the street vendors nearby fell quiet, as though everyone sensed they had just witnessed a line being crossed. "So," Wellington's voice cut through the air, steady but charged with controlled anger, "you have just assaulted a member of Her Majesty's Guard while on duty." The words didn't need to be shouted. They carried weight, sharp as steel. Marcus blinked, his cocky grin evaporating. "Hey, I was just trying to help you cool off. Man, it's hot. You look like you needed." "Step back immediately." The command was precise, forceful, leaving no room for argument. Something in his tone sent a ripple through the crowd. A few tourists instinctively stepped back themselves, as though the command had been meant for all of them. Marcus's phone wavered in his hand. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The script in his head, where the guard cracked, the crowd laughed, and his followers cheered online, was unraveling. Instead, he stood frozen, realizing he wasn't the star of the video. He was a fool. The guard's jaw clenched, his composure struggling to return, though the water still dripped from his chin. Behind those eyes, Marcus couldn't see centuries of discipline or military training. He saw a man pushed to his limit. Around them, whispers spread like fire. "Did you see that?" He actually threw water at him. He was in trouble now. The tourists were no longer amused spectators. They were witnesses to something they sensed was serious. Marcus opened his mouth to speak again, but no words came. His chest tightened, his earlier confidence gone. This wasn't a prank anymore. It was something else, something far bigger than he had imagined. And just as panic started to crawl up his spine, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed on the pavement. The guards weren't alone. Authority was coming, and Marcus was about to learn that his stunt carried consequences he could never have prepared for. As quickly as the chaos had erupted, order began to return. The officers guided Marcus aside, speaking to him in calm but firm tones. The crowd, though quieter now, stayed rooted in place, as though they couldn't look away. It was a scene that carried more weight than a casual tourist stunt. It felt like a moment of reckoning. Marcus's mind raced. Hours earlier, he had been just another traveler, chasing thrills for likes and followers. Now, with the world watching, he was forced to confront something deeper. The royal guard before him wasn't a character in a costume or a prop for a video. He was a soldier, one who bore the weight of tradition, duty, and unshakable discipline. It struck Marcus how blind he had been. The splash of water wasn't just water. It was an insult to centuries of honor, to a man who had sacrificed more than strangers would ever see. The laugh he had hoped for never came. Instead, he was left with silence, disappointment, and the raw sting of his own arrogance. The officers didn't drag him away in handcuffs. Instead, Inspector Hughes gave him something far more powerful: words. "Think about what you just did," he said, "and think about what it says about you, not him." Those words lodged deep, cutting through Marcus's panic like a scalpel. He realized punishment wasn't always physical. Sometimes it was a humiliation of facing your own reflection, seeing your choices for what they truly were. When the officers finally escorted him out to the palace grounds, the crowd slowly dispersed, but the atmosphere lingered, somber, reflective. Parents whispered to their children about respect. Tourists shook their heads, replaying the scene in their minds. And Sergeant Wellington, he simply stood tall once more, as if nothing had happened. His duty continued, unbroken, though inside, the water still clung to his uniform like a reminder. For Marcus, the lesson would last far longer than any viral video. He had come seeking fame, but left with something far heavier: the knowledge that some traditions aren't meant to be trifled with, and some silences carry more power than any outburst. Moments like these remind us that respect isn't just about rules. It's about seeing the human being behind the uniform, the ceremony, or the tradition. One careless act can ripple outward, leaving scars we don't always see. So, what do you think? Was Marcus's wake-up call fair, or do you believe he deserved even harsher consequences? Drop your thoughts in the comment below. I'd love to hear your perspective. And if this story struck a chord with you, don't forget to like this video so more people can reflect on it. Subscribe for more powerful, emotional stories that peel back the curtain on history, humanity, and the unexpected. And of course, share this with a friend, because sometimes the best conversations start with a story. Until next time, remember, true respect is silent, steady, and never taken for granted.